Hey guys, Languagehacker here. I wanted to talk a bit about my thoughts on the meta post-World Championship. And mainly, the focus of this video is going to be cards and or strategies that I would like to see changed, i.e. nerfed. I'm also going to talk a bit about some archetypes slash classes that I would like to see buffed as well, because I think nerfs are pretty straightforward in terms of the ones that I'd like to see. But I think changing some other stuff to be more in line with the power level of existing things is also kind of good. I don't think just nerfs are bad. And I think in the past when we've had buffs, it's generally been pretty positive. That being said, I don't have great buffs to propose because I will be honest, buffing is a lot harder than nerfing. Nerfing is like, you pick a card, bam, slap an extra mana on it, problem solved. Or you tweak a number. But buffing is a bit harder because it's hard to know what underperforming cards need to perform better, or what like archetype defining cards could be, improved. But let's start with the nerfs because that's easy. I'm going to start with my absolute favorite class, Rogue. There's a lot of cards here you could nerf, and that's generally not a good sign. But I think the ones that bother me the most are Sinstone Graveyard. I think this card is absurd at 2 mana. I think making it 3 mana would help a lot. It would mainly directly nerf Miracle Rogue, and I think it would delay the pop-off turn generally by a turn on average, and it means you can't just go like pass Graveyard, then pop off on 3 when you're on coin. Or if you're on the play, same thing. You have to usually wait until at least turn 4 most of the time to do something, and even then it's not going to be that huge. So I kind of like this being bumped up to 3. I would love for it to be bumped up to 4, but I think that's unnecessary, and that would actually probably kill the card. I think changing it to 3 mana will still let you do Miracle Rogue stuff without having... I don't know. It just slows the deck down, which is, I think, the main deal. I don't have a problem with making huge things. I also don't have a problem with lots of damage from hand, as long as it's not literally 30 with 0 interaction, and as long as it's not on turn like 3 or 4. So I think just slowing down that Miracle Rogue game plan is good. And in tandem with that, I also want them to change Necrolord Draka. I don't know how to change this. Reducing a durability is an option. Alternatively, you can bump up the mana cost. The stats on this really just don't matter. Like, the stats are fine. I think for the same reason that I'm talking about the Sinstone Graveyard, I think Draka to 5 mana is probably better than changing it to a 2-dagger. Because honestly, if it's a 20 dagger, like a 20 attack dagger, it doesn't matter if it's 3 or 2 durability. So I think just slowing down the game plan a little bit makes sense. And same thing, like this increasing by 1 generally slows down the Draka game plan by a turn. And the Graveyard being increased by 1 also generally delays the Graveyard. Is there anything else I want in Rogue? There's some notable cards in Rogue that could also be looked at, namely Prep and Shadow Step. I don't think Prep needs to die. Prep has already been nerfed once. I don't think changing into like a coin is worth it. I think leaving it as is fine. Shadow Step is also a pretty big offender on that deck. And it does get exacerbated now with Shadow's Demise. I don't think this needs to be changed. I think this is a cool card. It's a very good card, but I think it's kind of cool. This you could talk about changing, but I don't think you want to change like 5 cards in the deck. And this staying the same allows flexibility in other decks as well. Like Thief Rogue still runs this, for example, or at least some of the lists do. And with that, you still allow the Thief Rogue, for example, to do their thing without stepping on just Miracle Rogue toes. I don't know about the Death Rattle. I actually didn't think about that before I hit record here. Something needs to be changed. I think the easiest thing would be Snowfall Graveyard to 4 mana. But even like Sketchy, you could consider changing. I don't think you can change like Scourge Illusionist, because that's one of the big enablers, right? This is what enables, because you run only this guy and then the Sketchy information. If you change this to 5 mana, it completely kills the deck because you just can't do it anymore. Or the deck goes back to running Mines or something. So I think this is fine. You could consider making it smaller, but I think the 4-4-4-4 theme is fine. I think you just have to slow down the rate at which it pops off, which probably means... I keep doing this. Which probably means either touching Sketchy or Graveyard. The thing is, if you touch just one, you can still go like 3 into 4. But changing both might be a bit too much. I don't know. I don't have insight into the numbers and tweaks that the team has available. So it could be. Nerfing both might seem a bit much, but I don't know. I also haven't played as much of this deck as I've seen, or I haven't seen as much of this deck as I've seen Miracle Rogue, because Miracle Rogue's been around for so long and it's been just burned into my mind. But something in the Death Rattle package should also be tuned a little bit. One or both of these Maybe there's a way you can adjust the Scourge Illusionist, but I don't think you really can, right? Like, making it more expensive kills the deck because you can't play sketch information with it. And I don't know how much changing the stats really helps there. So I'm not sure about that. Because of that, it's probably going to be the sketchy / Snowfall Graveyard. So Rogue has a lot of problem cards, but it's because Rogue's a bit of a problem in my eyes. Demon Hunter. There's two main things I want to talk about here. You'll notice that in the combo deck, the only survivability, so to speak, in terms of defensive healing is Unleash Fel. So I think if you change this a little bit, the deck will become a bit slower. I don't know how you can really change this because it's literally deal 1 here. You can't make it deal 0. So this is probably slap on a 1 mana sticker on this. Make it 2 mana. You could mess around with the effect a bit, maybe not have it go face. That's an option. Deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. So that indirectly reduces the healing, but also means less damage goes face with Jace. That might be too much of a nerf, and I'm not sure about that. So it's either like mana or change this to not hit face. But I also think that the Relic package needs to be tuned down to some extent. And there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can either change Relic Vaults. I actually thought about this a little bit. I even considered changing durability to 1, but I think changing the durability to 1 is probably too far. You could do the old slap a mana on it, because I don't know how you change this. Like, you can't really change this effect. So you have to change the mana, or you have to change the durability. And I think changing the durability is too much. You could consider changing this to 3 mana. I don't know if relics need 2 nerfs. I think 1 is probably reasonable. And I don't think I'd prefer the Relic Vault. Changing this, what's worth noting, changing the Relic Vault to 3 mana means you can't go Vault on 2 into Relic of Phantasms on 3. So it messes up your curve, which is important. But I think the bigger gripe I have is Relic of Dimensions. And I think adding an extra mana here would be better than changing the mana of the Relic Vault, because you still have the curve available, and you still have the same, you know, stuff you're doing later on with drawing 4 cards, particularly in this quest deck. But, like, delaying this by a whole turn is actually kind of a big deal, because you have to flounder around for an extra turn before you can hit the vault and then play the Relic Dimensions on turn 6. So it slows it absolutely slows the deck down by at least 1 turn. The Relic Vault might not slow down the deck by 1 turn that often. So I'm leaning towards Relic of Dimensions. You could change both, but changing both and Unleash Fel might be a bit too hard. And that's where it's kind of hard to figure out, because there's so many interactions that are a little overtuned that it's hard to know which ones you can tweak down. Druid-wise, I've gotten kind of sick of the super overwhelming ramp, but I don't know if you can really change the ramp situation like a few months before rotation, nor if they want to at all. But I think something like Guff is still just fucking disgusting. Excuse my language. Like Guff is still just disgusting. But Guff aside, I think the more pressing issue, which actually isn't even Druid, there's 2 ways to change the Druid problem. I think one of the ways is a Nubercon. I don't know how you would change a Nubercon. You could tweak the armor number here. You can make him 9 mana. That's an option as well. Stat line doesn't matter. I think it has to be something on the text, or like, I mean, would gaining less armor even matter? It actually could matter if you limit it so you can't just play Astalor and Bran right after the Nubercon. Or you could change Astalor. And I think changing Astalor might be cleaner, and that way you still have access to all the Druid ramp stuff if they don't want to change that. I'd prefer to change the ramp, because the ramp enables this. Astalor isn't really a problem out of the decks, he's just like a finisher. But I think something in this interaction needs to change. The Bran and Nubercon Astalor stuff. It's just absurd amounts of damage. You kill people through a full board sometimes. It's not okay. So something here has to change. I don't know exactly what. I don't know what's easier, Astalor or Nubercon, or how you would change a Nubercon. I'm not even sure how you would even change Astalor. I don't think you can really change Astalor, so you'd probably have to change a Nubercon or something. Bran is also a consideration, but I don't think Bran needs to be touched. I think Bran is reasonable in a very large portion of decks, and is just a problem in some specific decks where you could also just change that class / archetypes main cards instead of changing Bran. But I don't know, maybe they just rotate Bran out in a few months anyways. Hunter's fine. They already nerfed Shock Spitter. That's kind of brought that back in range. Some people are playing some like 40 card stuff. I'm not super concerned with Hunter right now. I don't think it needs buffs either. I think one of the main reasons it's not quite as popular is because, and I'm going to say this for a lot of classes, is because like the top 3 or 4 decks right now just completely push everything outside of the meta. And a lot of stuff is probably just playable, but it can't keep up with the top decks. So I think these nerfs will address a lot of the meta, I guess, problems. Mage, I think, might need a buff after the other nerfs because there's just not enough stuff Mage can do. But maybe that changes. We might just go back to playing 40-card Mage like the World Championship just happened. And I think 2 or 3 of the top 4 players had XL Mage, 40-card Mage in their lineups. So maybe it is just fine if the other decks get tweaked. Control Paladin will get playable if the other stuff gets tweaked. I think an aggressive Paladin could make way as well if the other stuff gets tweaked. Blessed Priest needs to get touched. Plague Spreader Priest was quite popular at Worlds, at least in the top 4 again. Granted, that's not really representative of the latter meta and the average player. I don't think that deck needs to change, but after these changes, if it's like 80% Control Priest, then that probably has to be revisited. I don't think it will be. I think that's more of like a, put a bookmark there and come back to it after a week or 2 of the theoretical patch. There's a lot of stuff you can change here. You could change the mana. I'm talking about Boon Priest mainly. You could change the mana on this to 2 mana, which the main reason this got its way in the deck is now you can play Radiant Elemental early, and on the pop-off turn, you play this instead of Radiant Elemental, and you save 1 mana on the pop-off turn. So you could bump this back up to 2. You could change this somehow. I don't know how you would change this, though. I don't think you can change the text very easily. You could increase the cost of a Lich. The stats don't matter. Refresh an empty mana crystal for each 2 spells might be too big. So it might just be a mana slap. Animate Dead could be changed. But I don't think Animate Dead's the problem. I think you could... There's a couple things you could do. You could bump up Radiant Elemental. You could bump up Wig. Because Wig actually gets you a lot of stats there. But I think Wig's fine. I think if you bump up 2 mana, that fixes a lot of the problems. Because you give other decks a lot more time to get up to a point where it's manageable. So I think one of the big cards is Boon. Because if this is 5 mana, you can't pop off before turn 5. 4 or 5, depending on whether or not you hit Illuminates. So I think if you have 2 mana increases, this and Volish might be good enough. Alternatively, Radiant Elemental. But I don't think they want to change Radiant Elemental. Maybe they do. Changing it to 3 mana doesn't solve the issue because you can still play Animate Dead with it. And changing it to 4 mana is like, my god, are we really changing this to 4 mana? I don't know. Something here needs to change. I think it has to be a couple of cards. Because only 1 bump is not going to be enough, right? I don't think 1 mana bump on 1 card is going to be enough. It will help, but I'd like to see 2. I don't know which 2. You could talk about some other stuff too, like, I don't know, Handmaiden, but this isn't really a problem. It's only a problem in this deck, right? It enabled some Wig stuff too, that's fine. I don't think that's a problem. Yeah. I talked about Rogue. Shaman could probably use a buff somewhere, but I don't exactly know where. I think some decks, again, are actually playable after a round of nerfs. A round of reasonable nerfs, because... I mean, this is anecdotal, but I played some Shaman Ladder today, and it actually felt very close to playable. I was just dying a couple turns early against, believe it or not, the meta decks. So if the meta decks get brought down by a turn or 2, Shaman might be okay. Warlock's not that playable, huh? I think with the nerfs, theoretical nerfs that I'm talking about, you just bring back Mindlock. Mindlock's fine. Imp Curselock probably okay as well. I don't think you can play the new stuff very easily. I don't know how to buff the new stuff. You could consider buffing the new stuff. I don't know how to do that. That's a more complicated talking point. I know how to buff Warrior. You change this card to 3 mana. Because they're not going to revert Nelly. I don't think they want Charge Warrior to be like it used to be. So I don't think they're going to revert Nelly. And you can actually still play Charge Warrior right now. With Bone Whisperer, Lady Bone Whisperer, whatever she's called. But I think the only real change Warrior needs to be playable is from the depths of 3 mana. The main problem with Warrior right now is your game plan is pass, 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 and then you equip Outrider's Axe on 4. And then your game starts. And if you have a little bit of wiggle room there by playing, like, From the Depths on 3, it is powerful, but, like, it's not powerful compared to the other stuff going on in the meta. So there I could absolutely tell you I would like From the Depths changed back down to 3 mana. Yeah, have I talked about everything I wanted to? You could, I guess buffs. Death Knight you could buff in many different ways, and buffing like archetype defining cards is definitely something that you can do. But honestly, I think a lot of Death Knight cards are actually just good right now, and the decks aren't performing well because, once again, the top decks are pushing everything else out of the meta, Death Knight included. I actually think a lot of Death Knight cards are strong but fair, considering what Hearthstone is nowadays. So I think with the tweaks that I'm talking about to, like, DH, Rogue, Druid, and Priest, this could actually just be fine. I haven't played too much Unholy, so maybe that archetype needs some help, but I've seen people do, like, okay with Frost and Blood, and I think that'll just continue to be reasonable and probably good after the top decks get changed. Anyways, the meta is basically the same as it was pre-expansion, which is really unfortunate. You have, like, a trickle of Death Knights here and there, but otherwise it's the same. Like, it's Ram Druid, it's a random OTK deck from Demon Hunter, Miracle Rogue, and Ram Druid, and that's just, yeah, just God, I'm sick of it. It's so hard to play anything else. So, these are the nerfs and theoretical buffs I would like to see. Take this with a grain of salt. I'm not a designer, and I didn't put too much thought into buffs. Buffs are something that's actually, I think, really interesting to put a lot of thought into, but I didn't have time for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'm sure you'll tell me why you think I'm wrong, but, you know, tell me why you think I'm wrong in the comments below, or tell me what you would like to see changed. See ya.